but I'm pretty confident that you do have at least final impressions of Metro 2033.
Yes, I did. And I'm going to start off with a statement, and I'd be interested to hear how you would interpret this. And the most simple summary is that Metro 2033 was everything I hoped it would be and everything I expected it to be as well.
Well, if Metro 23 was everything you hoped it to be and expected it to be, that could be a positive statement on the face of it.
Okay, so your interpretation is positive.
Or it could be like whenever I watch a movie, I'm like, okay, that's everything I hoped and expected it to be. Because usually it's a pile of crap, and
so you
I
hoped
don't have
it
to
was
change.
crap.
Yeah, because then I wouldn't have to change my perspective on film. I wouldn't have to start going to see movies again.
Okay.
Right? It's kind of like the Microsoft Xbox One reveal. It's kind of like, okay, well, that was refreshing. That's everything I hoped and expected it to be. I don't have to worry about that company anymore. I can just move on with my life.
Yeah. Okay, well, I like that interpretation. So afterwards, we can find out if you like. So I'm not going to answer definitively what the meaning behind that was. It should come clear through my comments on the game itself. Now, I think, once again, a while ago, we were talking about how impressive the effects were, despite the limitations of how poorly rendered the environments were, right?
Right, yep.
Yep, and there are times in Metro 2033 where they use the lighting and shadows to make scenes as visually breathtaking and affecting as they do in Last Light, which I think is an incredible achievement considering how brilliant technically the lighting is in Last Light and how well it is used. So, visually, there are times where the art direction in the game is just absolutely mind-blowing, what they're able to achieve with what they're working with.
I was thinking this just today about Last Light, and that is like, if you were to walk into a room, before you even see someone, you have a sense that someone's there.
Yeah.
And everyone, well, I have a sense that someone's there. And it's all because of the non-visual influences a person in a room has on light. If they're wearing a bright jacket, it can be reflecting on a wall or just increasing the light level somewhat.
Yep.
They can be casting a shadow. They can be blocking the natural light. You might not see their shadow, but they could be blocking the natural light that would be there. And this is a key part of what we were talking about earlier. There's all these little tricks that, makes the mind's eye believe what they're seeing.
Yeah.
And that's really where I think this next generation graphics is heading. People really studying this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's where Last Light succeeded, I think, because they got the lighting technically to such a degree where they could imitate those sorts of things where you might get a sense someone's there despite not directly seeing them from how the light has reflected from their clothing back onto the world around them. Well, the lighting in 2033 is far behind that, yet they still managed to get certain much more abstract and artistic senses from the stuff they're working with that is way behind that. So I think, with Last Light, that got a huge amount of praise because of the supposedly poor conditions they were working in, right? Did you read anything about this?
Yeah, Dave Perry, the momentary CEO of THQ, mentioned offhand that the guys were basically having to smuggle in dev kits because they didn't want to have to pay kickbacks to government officials, that they were working on fold-up tables and chairs elbow to elbow, and they had to deal with power outages, and he described it as inhuman. I would describe that as my regular day at work.
Yeah,
but
they were pretty ridiculous comments, and even if the conditions were worse than what were described, I still wouldn't say that has any effect. It's not worth commenting on as far as the context of the work, but I would say that it is worth commenting on when someone has got limited technology, because they were given the same technology that people at AAA developers were working with. Here, they've got technology that is way behind the stuff they were working with on Last Light, and at many points they've achieved the same visual effects that they've achieved in Last Light, which I think is worthy of praise in and of itself as far as their achievements. And I think that context makes what they've achieved with 2033 all the more impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. They've got some deep thinkers over there. They've got their own Carmack working on this stuff, clearly.
Yeah. Now, the next brilliant thing about it, and this, once again, completely confirmed my disappointment that Ranger Hardcore was not included in Last Light. In Metro 2033 on Ranger Hardcore, it's not so much that you do have to look for more ammo, it's also the fact that you die so easily. This completely changes how you have to approach every single battle. If you're playing on Ranger Hardcore, going in guns blazing is simply completely impossible, because even if you then go and run behind cover and the enemies cannot shoot you, because they're reasonably accurate, you're simply going to be trapped there for 40 minutes unable to move out of there, or until an aggressive AI comes out to kill you. So it forces you to play as stealth. Now, the same thing can be said for Last Light to a degree, but the difference is in Last Light, because they've gone for a much more mainstream design, the levels are designed as traditional stealth environments. So they've got vents under the ground that you can sneak into where enemies are going to completely lose you, and there's lots of hidey holes and stuff like that that don't make sense in the environment. It's completely unrealistic, but they're there for the stealth, and they make the stealth very easy. In Metro 2033, they're designed as much more believable first-person shooter game environments. So you're forced to do stealth in an environment that is not designed for stealth. And this might sound like bad game design, right?
Well, it depends. I mean, if they're going after a mood as opposed to a technique, it sounds like they're succeeding at that.
And it works as a technique as well, because you've then got to use light as your stealth. So you've got to survey the area, and instead of looking for stealth hidey holes, which are always signposted because they have to be obviously signposted, there's going to be a vent on the wall, but it's got to stick out so that you know it's a vent you can access. Instead of that, you're looking at a normal environment that is full of shadows. So it applies a very overt stealth aesthetic and makes the stealth viable in a normal, believable first-person shooter environment. And that changes the whole feeling of the stealth. It makes it so much more nerve-wracking, because at any time, because you're not hidden in a box where an enemy's not going to be able to find you, if you give yourself away, you then basically got nowhere to hide and you were completely screwed. And it makes it such an incredibly engrossing challenge and incredibly hard, but it's never frustrating because it's always up to you stuffing up to give yourself away. And another thing they did, which is awesome, is throughout these levels where it's hard as hell to see anything to begin with, there's bits of broken glass and bottles and debris strewn about on the ground. If you make a noise, so if you stand on a bottle and you break it, if you walk through some broken glass, or if you kick a bit of wood along the ground, enemies are going to hear you there, and you're going to give yourself away. So not only have you got to look for viable areas to hide, you've also got to make sure the ground you're walking on is not going to give you away. And the final thing you've got to be doing is, you're not just looking for enemies that might be carrying a torch, you've also got to look for enemies that are wearing night vision goggles, which are hard as hell to see. So it is this incredibly imposing experience on Ranger Hardcore, because you are forced to approach these battles by stealth, and it is done so brilliantly. This, I would say, is in the absolute upper echelon of stealth. This is comparable to the best Splinter Cell games and is at the level of Metal Gear Solid or above it when it comes to stealth.
So it doesn't bog down the pace of it, or it does bog it down, but in a positive way?
It completely bogs down the pace of it, but in a positive way, because the aesthetic is this completely bleak, totalitarian feel to it. So it actually works best in the gameplay when you are faced with what appears to be and feels like an insurmountable challenge. So it bogs the pacing down completely, but that is the strength of the pacing, that it is such an incredible, challenging, slow burn.
It's actually realistic. I mean, if you were in that setting, you'd take all the time you could and observe all you could and take every advantage of the environment that you could.
That's right. And
yeah.
The only flaw I can come up with the stealth, and it is unfortunately an incredibly annoying one, is the auto-saving system, which has no logic behind it. Sometimes it's auto-saves when you've killed a bunch of enemies or where you have got to a certain point of level. So at those instances you think, okay, that's logical. At other times it just auto-saves randomly when you've been sitting somewhere for 2 minutes. So there appears to be no consistency to it. And the other issue is it doesn't work with auto-saving when you've killed people because of the reliance on stealth. So, for example, at one stage I had to kill these people that were on a moving train. So when I kill the people on the moving train, the train keeps moving, right?
I would hope so.
Yep.
I mean, unless they're driving the train.
Well, the momentum is going to keep it going, even though whether they're driving it or not. So you kill the people, the train keeps moving. As soon as I kill them, the game auto-saved. Now, the problem was that it auto-saved as they were going back towards other people I hadn't approached yet. Now, I didn't know there were people up here, so I killed them in ignorance that I shouldn't have killed them when they were going in that direction. So, unfortunately, this resulted in when I then followed the train up there, everyone was on alert because there'd just been a on-fire train arrive with lots of dead people on it. So I was effectively screwed at this stage, and there was basically nothing I could do except for sprint all the way along the track to beat the train and act as basically a ninja of perfectly killing like 5 people without any of them noticing the other people dying. Which, on the one hand, actually does work with the aesthetic because it forces you to deal with the consequences of what you've done. So, but on the other hand, it is kind of retarded at the same time. But I still can't criticize that too badly because it did force me to deal with the consequences of me killing these people too hastily before sneaking on ahead and figuring out, okay, I can't kill the people then. So
yeah.
That's kind of cool, as retarded as it is. But there's other occasions where the auto-saving doesn't work. There's a glitch that occurs where if you're moving 20% of the time, you're going to automatically be moving when you reload that autosave. Normally, this is not too much of an issue, but quite often it does autosave when you're on a ledge. So it's going to autosave, you get killed 20 seconds later, it reloads, you're going to automatically walk off the ledge.
Yeah.
So
this is something typical of PC gaming, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But usually I do it to myself. The game doesn't do it to me.
So you do it with quick saving?
Oh, I do it with if I'm backed into a corner and I have 2 bullets in my gun against a boss battle, I'll be like, okay, well, I made some progress. I'll save here.
Yeah.
And then, yeah.
And so there are glitches throughout the entire game. And another one that was a huge problem, and this happens with some regularity, but it's not usually a huge issue. At one stage, I was talking to some characters. Now, they were meant to tell me what to do. They didn't. They said their random story-based banter and didn't give me the instructions on what I was meant to do. So I was stuck in this situation where there was a turret and there were enemies running towards where we all were. So I thought this meant, okay, I'm meant to shoot these enemies. So for 5 minutes, I was killing these respawning enemies when what I was actually meant to do was
awesome.
Quite a complex thing, which consisted of me having to pick up explosives and place them in a certain area. And because of the design of the level, there is a compass that you can access even on Ranger Hardcore, which guides you where you're meant to be going. The issue is, this was a multi-story level. So what the compass actually guided me to was the spawning point of the enemies. in an area where I suffocated to death. And, of course, what I was actually meant to go to was below that area, but it literally guided me there, up these stairs, right to that point. So I had to actually check a guide to work out, oh, wait a minute, you're actually meant to be doing this incredibly complex thing that actually does need expositional instruction.
Wow.
Yeah.
Same thing happened to me in Mass Effect 3. I got to a turret level and I killed everyone except apparently one enemy that was off screen and completely unable to kill him.
Yeah.
So there was no progression because you had to kill him to progress the game.
Yeah.
But there was no way to kill him, and there was no way you could get down from the turret because they didn't want you to leave the turret area.
Yeah.
So, yeah, games.
And
Gotta
now
love
the
them.
other thing, go on.
No, that's it.
Okay, yep. The other thing I was going to say, or rather, the other thing I mentioned a while ago was the issue of your teammates, because on Ranger Hardcore, enemies die so quickly. When you're then with teammates, the issue is they can easily kill them. So then, when you're with teammates, it is basically you just follow them, running the fuck away, or hitting things with knives to conserve your ammo. Now, I think this actually works better than in hard mode on Last Light, where there were instances where they didn't get the ammo balance and you ended up with way too much stuff, so you could just breeze through enemies. And you were basically using your battles against people just to restock your ammo. I think this actually does work better than those instances because even when you are with your teammates on Ranger Hardcore, you do still have to be playing well because except during the initial time where you're going along and you can just let the enemies attack them 100%, the enemies then do start attacking you. So while you can to a degree conserve your ammo, you do actually have to play well to survive. So I think this was less of an issue as the ammo balancing was in hard mode on Last Light. And another issue for this is because you are playing on Ranger Hardcore mode where you die so easily. So a great example of this, I think, is two of the weapon types in the game, the throwing knives and the guns that shoot arrows, the pneumatically powered crossbows, if you want to call them that. You can then go up to the enemy that you've killed or even shots you've missed and pick up your ammo. So you've then basically got an unlimited supply of ammo, right?
Okay.
So you don't have to make as much of a focus on your ammo conservation. But because you're constantly panicked in Ranger Hardcore mode, because you can die in an instant,
right,
you're still going to be shitting yourself the entire time. So even though that does affect the extremely small amount of ammo around, I think it doesn't detract from the extreme challenge of the game overall, and you're still panicked. So once again, I think it was a huge slap in the face not to include Ranger Hardcore mode in Last Light, especially because the levels were so designed around stealth. Because in Metro 2033, you are really completely screwed in some of the levels because it is based around stealth and they're not stealth levels, so there is so much more effort that you've got to put into working out the enemies, where all the enemies are, what they're doing, and where you can kill them without being noticed and at what points you can kill them without being noticed. This is clearly, because this was released as DLC after the game was originally made, this was clearly meant to be the ultimate challenge. So you can understand this being released at a later point as an add-on, as the ultimate way to play the game. In Last Light, they've designed the levels to make stealth more accessible. So it makes it seem even more that they designed the game based around you playing on Ranger Hardcore, which just makes it all the more bullshit that it was released as DLC.
Yeah, as a retailer benefit or whatever.
Yeah.
So with the Metro series, you've now played all of the games, right?
Yes, I have.
And, I mean, are you champing at the bit rather, not chomping on the bit, but champing at the bit for the next Metro game? Are you curious as to see where they take it? What's your overall standing with Metro? One of your new favorite franchises?
Yep. I would say I am considering buying the DLC if I can't get it for free. So that probably answers the rest of your questions.
Yes, because you would not pay $5 a month for
PSN Plus, and
PlayStation Plus.
I've never bought DLC in my life except when it is included in a Game of the Year edition.
Wow. So we may soon be changing the Yakuza Killzone Minute to the Yakuza Metro Minute.
Yeah, well,
that's a nice ring to it.
I agree, and well, actually, it is to the point where I will be playing Stalker next. So,
ooh, okay.
Yeah, but
all right.
Just a couple of final things on this. Another reason that you really, even despite all the problems with just how challenging it is, if you don't want to be forced to play through what would be maybe half an hour on hard, an hour or even 2 hours on Ranger Hardcore because you've got to learn the environment, you need to at least attempt it, because one of the best things about this series is the tactility of everything in the game. If you're using a pneumatically powered weapon, you don't just reload the arrows that it's using or the steel balls it's launching. You've got to manually pump it up. And you've got to be making sure that it is pumped up at all times, because if it runs out of steam, it will no longer shoot. As the levels of steam go down, it becomes less powerful. If you're using, you also, of course, got to be pumping up your torch constantly. If you're playing on Ranger Hardcore, you've also got to be constantly opening your journal to check your overall ammo, which is something you see visually being done in the game, and there are no crosshairs, except if it's a laser, if there's a laser crosshair, which you can turn off if you want. But I think it is just adds so much to the whole atmosphere of the game. It makes it, I'd say, probably the only first-person experience that I can think of that has the same level of atmosphere and immersion is Metroid Prime. It takes it to just supreme immersion, where you are 100% immersed in the world, because it is so hands-on and tactile, and you do lose that to a degree if you are playing on hard, where you can see your ammo without having to look down at the clip of your weapon or open your journal.
It sounds like the exact opposite. When you said, like, how there's a tactile link to the game,
yeah,
it just reminded me, I started playing Halo ODST this week.
Yep.
Oh, that game is a joke. Oh my god. Keeping in mind, Halo 4 was my runner-up game of the year last year.
Yep.
I'm not a hater, guys.
Yeah.
But, there is something for the show possibly after the next show, after I beat Sonic Generations and Last of Us. But, wow, this thing is comedy gold. It's going to keep giving and giving. It's amazing. It's funnier than Red and Blue. It's funnier than Red and Blue.
As funny as the old episodes or as the new episodes, which are complete crap?
Whatever. I mean, this is, when people say it's so bad it's good, this is what they're talking about.
Okay. So, just one last thing on the tactility now. You don't need to play it on Ranger Hardcore to do this, and I recommend anyone does this, as counterintuitive as it might sound, turn off the crosshairs. If you start this game, no matter the difficulty, because there is an option in the menu, turn off the damn crosshairs. The reason is, it adds so much to the franticness of the gameplay. And maybe this is impossible for people, but Killzone 2 actually taught me to play games without the crosshairs, because when I decided to become good at Killzone 2, I was using the heavy weapons. The crosshairs on that are completely useless because they're so gigantic. So whenever I'm playing Killzone 2, I believe there's also an option to turn it off in Killzone 2. I haven't, but the crosshair, I literally do not see it on screen when I'm playing Killzone 2. So when I'm playing Metro 2033, even though if there is no crosshairs, so I don't have the issues that other people might have when they are playing a game with no crosshairs, because they're used to using the crosshairs. But it adds so much to it, because what it means is you are then going to be using your scope, which adds time. You've got to wait for the character to move their perspective to the scope. So you're only going to be able to use the scope when you're in a relaxed environment. The rest of the time, you're going to be panicked, not using your scope or your sights. So to a degree, you're going to be shooting blindly because you are panicked. And it just adds to the immersion of the panicness of the player that there are no scopes. So you've then got to be watching where your bullets are going and making sure you're hitting the enemies, bearing in mind that at the same time you're going to want to be conserving ammo because of the lower amount of ammo, even to other first-person shooters on the lower difficulty levels.
It sounds good to me. But obviously, this is a game that strength lies in the immersiveness of it, and it would bring me back to when I was a kid.
Yep.
You know, playing army with my friends, and we'd pretend that a neighbor slowly walking through the neighborhood was a Nazi spy or something. You know, it sounds like it's evoking all of those same types of things.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And the other thing I would say is that the shooting, the level design, everything is good in and of itself, so you can enjoy this as a straight first-person shooter, as long as you're willing to accept that it is significantly harder than the vast majority of first-person shooters and does need to be approached slightly differently to most of them, even on hard. And just the last thing I'm going to say on as far as the game design is concerned, the fact that this is a completely different experience if you play it on hard, yet is still an excellent first-person shooter / stealth game, I think deserves huge plaudits because you've effectively then got two excellent games that you can play through for the one price. Because it does change the game absolutely completely, and both are extremely well designed.
Yeah, well, I have the game, but I don't remember. I think it does have controller support. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah. And
we'll see how it goes.
You may not enjoy it. I would say you probably wouldn't enjoy it as much as me, anywhere near. Because
yeah, I probably want to blaze through it in a first-person shooter type thing.
Yeah. Now, the final thing...
Wait, that's your fifth or sixth final thing?
Yeah.
Is this really the final thing?
Yes, it is actually the final thing. It refers to the final thing in the game. Now, this applies to both Last Light and 2033. Now, you've probably heard about this, but the way they do the alternative ending is extremely good. So as you're playing through the game, at no stage does it even imply that there are multiple endings. But every now and then, there are certain things you can do, and if you do enough of them, they result in you getting an alternative ending. So, for example, at one stage, someone offers you some bullets as a reward, and within the game world, you're aware, okay, bullets are used not only as currency, but these people are going to need these bullets to survive. So without the carrot of, okay, obviously this is going to be used for some good ending, right? You're already thinking about, should I take the bullets or not, if you're immersed in the store, in the game world.
So it doesn't pop up on the screen, Dimitri will remember this?
That's right. It's just this character offering you bullets, and you can accept them or you can tell them to keep it. That's all it says.
Given that I play every game as an RPG and that I invest myself in the character that I'm playing, if it's that sort of game, I do that sort of stuff in Grand Theft Auto. You know, there's no payoff for it, but it's like, this is what the character would do in this situation. So that's why in Red Dead Redemption, I never tied up a lady to the railroad tracks, because that's not what the character would do, you know? So in Metro, they never signpost this stuff, but there is a payoff for it. That must be supremely satisfying.
Yeah, and I think that gives both endings so much more validity, because you're not then thinking, when you get the ending, you're not immediately thinking, well, what was the other ending? Did I actually get the shit one, right?
Like in Mass Effect 3, where it's like, all you can think about is, oh, no, that kind of sucked. I wonder what I could have done differently to get the good ending.
And it also is beneficial to the writing of the story as well, because it gives them a easier way to integrate it into it, because they are put at points where it makes sense in a normal story, right? where you might have that sort of dilemma, whereas because they want to signpost these things so much, they make it a game mechanic, and that's where they insert it in the story. And so then it messes with the ending and makes it less satisfying as far as the narrative is concerned as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then back to Spec Ops: The Line,
Yep.
none of that was signposted at all, that there were going to be different enemies.
Exactly.
It was never signposted, and it was only after you played the game and you talked to other people, and it's like, oh, you did that because I did this and I got a different ending.
Exactly. And this does it exactly like Spec Ops. And
Yeah.
obviously the story is nowhere near as good as Spec Ops, but it is an awesome way to do it, and they deserve huge kudos for that. And on the ending, once again, if you remember in my last light review, I said the beginning of the game was tonally just completely wrong, right?
Yes.
This has confirmed that 100%. The ending here was, and this is the ending that they continued from in Last Light, the ending that I got, completely melancholy, and you couldn't describe it as a good ending. It was the bad ending. Not as in it was a bad ending, but it was a sad, bad ending that is not what the characters were after. And then in Last Light, it is presented as this great moment of elation. It was so jarring. Even though I had played Metro 2033, you could just feel this is wrong. And so this has just confirmed that they completely fucked up the beginning of Last Light so badly.
I'm almost afraid to say, is that it?
No. No, it is not. The final thing...
You promised on the seventh final thing that would be it.
And that is how you know it wasn't going to be it. But if you hadn't asked that, I would have ended. So, I'm blaming you.
Okay, you know what?
Yep.
From here on out, the show's yours. You do the outro.
Sure.
You do the final impression. Go. Sure. You can do it.
Sure. So,
right,
the final thing is, I thought it was interesting, the differences in the story between Last Light and 2033, because 2033 is directly based on the novel, and Last Light is an original story. So you could see that the story in 2033 had a much more complex structure and came across as a novel. And so you could see all the things where, okay, this is awesome in a novel, but doesn't quite work here in a game. So, but despite these jarring moments where you saw something that was clearly taken from a novel that didn't work in games, as was demonstrated in the incredibly jarring opening, the story in 2033, all in all, I would say was a whole lot more successful because it was much more down to earth. In Last Light, they had a lot more of the political stuff, which was very entertaining, but didn't contribute as much to the bleak atmosphere as in 2033. And that's it. The end.